Welcome to the Point. This week, we recap the Democratic National Convention. In accepting the presidential nomination, Vice President Kamala Harris talked about what she believes is at stake in this election, as well as her background, including her time as a prosecutor in her home state of California.
As a prosecutor, when I had a case, I charged it not in the name of the victim, but in the name of the people. For a simple reason. In our system of justice, a harm against any one of us is a harm against all of us. And I would often explain this to console survivors of crime, to remind them no one should be made to fight alone. We are all in this together. And every day in the courtroom, I stood proudly before a judge and I said 5 words: Kamala Harris for the people. And to be clear, my entire career, I've only had one client, the people. And so, on behalf of the people, on behalf of every American, regardless of party, race, gender, or the language your grandmother speaks, on behalf of my mother and everyone who has ever set out on their own unlikely journey, on behalf of Americans like the people I grew up with, people who work hard, chase their dreams, and look out for one another, on behalf of everyone whose story could only be written in the greatest nation on earth, I accept your nomination to be President of the United States of America. And with this election, our nation with this election has a precious, fleeting opportunity to move past the bitterness, cynicism, and divisive battles of the past, a chance to chart a new way forward. Not as members of any one party or faction, but as Americans. And let me say, I know there are people of various political views watching tonight, and I want you to know, I promise to be a president for all Americans. You can always trust me to put country above party and self, to hold sacred America's fundamental principles, from the rule of law to free and fair elections to the peaceful transfer of power. I will be a president who unites us around our highest aspirations, a president who leads and listens, who is realistic, practical, and has common sense, and always fights for the American people. From the courthouse to the White House, that has been my life's work. As a young courtroom prosecutor in Oakland, California, I stood up for women and children against predators who abuse them. As Attorney General of California, I took on the big banks, delivered $20 billion for middle-class families who faced foreclosure, and helped pass a homeowner Bill of Rights, one of the first of its kind in the nation. I stood up for veterans and students being scammed by big for-profit colleges, for workers who are being cheated out of their wages, the wages they were due, for seniors facing elder abuse. I fought against the cartels who traffic in guns and drugs and human beings, who threaten the security of our border and the safety of our communities. And I will tell you, these fights were not easy. And neither were the elections that put me in those offices. We were underestimated at practically every turn. But we never gave up, because the future is always worth fighting for. And that's the fight we are in right now, a fight for America's future. Fellow Americans, this election is not only the most important of our lives, it is one of the most important in the life of our nation. In many ways, Donald Trump is an unserious man. But the consequences of putting Donald Trump back in the White House are extremely serious. Consider not only the chaos and calamity when he was in office, but also the gravity of what has happened since he lost the last election. Donald Trump tried to throw away your votes. When he failed, he sent an armed mob to the United States Capitol, where they assaulted law enforcement officers. When politicians in his own party begged him to call off the mob and send help, he did the opposite. He fanned the flames. And now, for an entirely different set of crimes, he was found guilty of fraud by a jury of everyday Americans, and separately found liable for committing sexual abuse. And consider what he intends to do if we give him power again. Consider his explicit intent to set free violent extremists who assaulted those law enforcement officers at the Capitol. His explicit intent to jail journalists, political opponents, and anyone he sees as the enemy. His explicit intent to deploy our active duty military against our own citizens. Consider the power he will have, especially after the United States Supreme Court just ruled that he would be immune from criminal prosecution. Just imagine Donald Trump with no guardrails, and how he would use the immense powers of the presidency of the United States, not to improve your life, not to strengthen our national security, but to serve the only client he has ever had, himself.
The Democrats' choice for vice president also made his acceptance speech. Part of that is next. To the Point. Welcome back to the Point. At the DNC in Chicago, they welcomed Minnesota Governor Tim Walz as their vice presidential candidate, who talked about some of what he sees as his accomplishments as governor, including action on reproductive health.
We also protected reproductive freedom because in Minnesota, we respect our neighbors and the personal choices they make. And even if we wouldn't make those same choices for ourselves, we've got a golden rule. Mind your own damn business. And that includes IVF and fertility treatments. And this is personal for Gwen and I. If you've never experienced the hell that is infertility, I guarantee you, you know somebody who has. And I can remember praying each night for a phone call. The pit in your stomach when the phone would ring, and the absolute agony when we heard the treatments hadn't worked. It took Gwen and I years, but we had access to fertility treatments. And when our daughter was born, we named her Hope. Hope, Gus, and Gwen, you are my entire world, and I love you. I'm letting you in on how we started a family because this is a big part about what this election is about. Freedom. When Republicans use the word freedom, they mean that the government should be free to invade your doctor's office. Corporations free to pollute your air and water. And banks free to take advantage of customers. But when we Democrats talk about freedom, we mean the freedom to make a better life for yourself and the people that you love. Freedom to make your own health care decisions. And yeah, your kids' freedom to go to school without worrying about being shot dead in the hall. Look, I know guns. I'm a veteran. I'm a hunter. And I was a better shot than most Republicans in Congress, and I got the trophies to prove it. But I'm also a dad. I believe in the Second Amendment, but I also believe our first responsibility is to keep our kids safe. That's what this is all about. The responsibility we have to our kids, to each other, and to the future that we're building together, in which everyone is free to build the kind of life they want. But not everyone has that same sense of responsibility. Some folks just don't understand what it takes to be a good neighbor. Take Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. Their Project 2025 will make things much, much harder for people who are just trying to live their lives. They spent a lot of time pretending they know nothing about this. But look, I coached high school football long enough to know, and trust me on this, when somebody takes the time to draw up a playbook, they're going to use it. And we know if these guys get back in the White House, they'll start jacking up the costs on the middle class, they'll repeal the Affordable Care Act, they'll gut Social Security and Medicare, and they will ban abortion across this country with or without Congress. Here's the thing. It's an agenda nobody asked for. It's an agenda that serves nobody except the richest and the most extreme amongst us. And it's an agenda that does nothing for our neighbors in need. Is it weird? Absolutely. Absolutely. But it's also wrong. And it's dangerous. It's not just me saying so. It's Trump's own people. They were with him for 4 years. They're warning us that the next 4 years will be much, much worse. You know, when I was teaching every year, we'd elect a student body president. And you know what? Those teenagers could teach Donald Trump a hell of a lot about what a leader is. Leaders don't spend all day insulting people and blaming others. Leaders do the work. So I don't know about you. I'm ready to turn the page on these guys. So go ahead. Say it with me. We're not going back. We've got something better to offer the American people. It starts with our candidate, Kamala Harris. From her first day as a prosecutor, as a district attorney, as an attorney general, as a United States senator, and then our vice president, she's fought on the side of the American people. She's taken on the predators and fraudsters. She's taken down the transnational gangs, and she stood up to powerful corporate interests. She has never hesitated to reach across that aisle if it meant improving your lives. And she's always done it with energy, with passion, and with joy. Folks, we've got a chance to make Kamala Harris the next president of the United States. But I think we owe it to the American people to tell them exactly what she'd do as president before we ask them for their votes. So here, this is the part, clip and save it and send it to your undecided relatives so they know. If you're a middle-class family or a family trying to get into the middle class, Kamala Harris is going to cut your taxes. If you're getting squeezed by prescription drug prices, Kamala Harris is going to take on Big Pharma. If you're hoping to buy a home, Kamala Harris is going to help make it more affordable. And no matter who you are, Kamala Harris is going to stand up and fight for your freedom to live the life that you want to lead. Because that's what we want for ourselves, and it's what we want for our neighbors. You know, you might not know it, but I haven't given a lot of big speeches like this. But I have given a lot of pep talks. So let me finish with this, team. It's the fourth quarter. We're down a field goal, but we're on offense and we've got the ball. We're driving down the field. And boy, do we have the right team. Kamala Harris is tough. Kamala Harris is experienced, and Kamala Harris is ready. Our job for everyone watching is to get in the trenches and do the blocking and tackling. 1 inch at a time, 1 yard at a time, 1 phone call at a time, 1 door knock at a time, 1 $5 donation at a time. Look, we got 76 days. That's nothing. There'll be time to sleep when you're dead. We're going to leave it on the field. That's how we'll keep moving forward. That's how we'll turn the page on Donald Trump. That's how we'll build a country where workers come first. Health care and housing are human rights. And the government stays the hell out of your bedroom.
As for Project 2025, former President Donald Trump, as late as Thursday, again disavowed his connection with the plan. Speaking of the former president, he was in Howell this week. A brief look at what he was highlighting next. To the point. Former President Donald Trump was in Howell this week, and his focus was on crime.
We're here today to talk about how we are going to stop the Kamala crime wave that is going on at levels that nobody's ever seen before. And she is, as you know, the most radical left person ever even thought of for a high office, certainly for the office of president. People don't know the real Kamala, but I do, and people that do what I do, they also know. But she is so far left that nobody can even imagine, and her real thoughts are there. You know, she's changed. They call her a flip-flopper at the highest level that they've ever seen in politics, because she's come out with policy and for years defund the police. You don't mind defunding, do you, fellas? Would you vote for a defunder? Would you vote? By the way, your people that you protect don't want defunders either. But she's been there until just recently, but she's always been for defunding the police. And the person that she's running with, Tim Walz, is equally far left. This is the most far left group. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. And the press is giving them a free pass, and you're not going to have, if it was up to them, you wouldn't even have the men behind me, people behind me, representatives behind me. You wouldn't have them. They wouldn't have a job. They think it's going to just police itself. Everything's going to take care of itself. Her father is, as you know, a Marxist professor, and he obviously did a good job. But this is where she's coming from. And, you know, you see her now with a smile, and she's gotten rid of the laugh over the last couple of days. I don't know. I haven't seen her laugh. They've told her, don't laugh, please. But I'll bet inside she was laughing last night when she saw the way Joe Biden left, because that was a coup. That was a coup. And I'm no fan of his at all. And it started with the debate, and from that point on, it just got worse and worse. But that was a coup. It was a vicious, violent overthrow of a president of the United States. Since Comrade Kamala Harris took office, her administration's crime statistics show she's presided over a 43% increase in violent crime. These are all government numbers. 43% increase in violent crime. I'll bet the people behind me don't have anything like that. Just gets better, it doesn't get worse. Including a 58% increase in rape, 89% increase in aggravated assault, and a 56% increase in robbery. The crime in America, the fact is out of control. I watched last night in amazement as they tried to pretend that everything was great, the crime was great, the border was great, there wasn't a problem at all, no inflation, no nothing. There has been a report that the job numbers over the last period of time were fraudulent, and and I understand that because I know how the job numbers go, and if you want to be a bad person in high office, you can be a bad person, but the numbers are going to be revised, that the job numbers were far less, at nobody's ever seen, if the 600,000 to 1 million people less, jobs less. And let's see if that turns out to be true, but that's what the rumor is. It was reported by a very respected outfit group, and we'll see what happens. But that's a terrible insult to our economy, because we were seeing numbers that were okay, not great, but now we're seeing numbers that, when they're adjusted, are a disaster.
The crime statistics that Mr. Trump used were widely disputed by the Harris campaign and others. And a Pew Research Center analysis of federal reporting of crime suggests a sharp rise in crime, including murders during the pandemic. But those trends, with preliminary data for 2023, appear to have subsided considerably. That's all the time we have. We'll see you next week. To the point.